Okay, hello everyone. I think most people are pretty much logged in, but just to say hello and welcome to today's question and answer session. I'm delighted today to be joined by not one but two course directors for our part-time online healthcare ethics and law programme, Professor Rebecca Bennett and Professor Sarah Devaney. So during today's webinar, we're going to start by introducing ourselves, and then we're going to do a question and answer session with some questions that have been pre-submitted. And then we've got time as well for a live Q&A session as well. And for those live questions, you can submit them either by using the chat or by using the Q&A function in Zoom as well. So please don't be shy and please do ask your questions throughout. And then after the Q&A session, I'm going to just give you a bit of a brief course overview, which includes giving you some information about our entry requirements and some contact details as well at the end. So for those of you who I've not spoken to before, I'm Hazel and I'm part of the course advisor team here at the University of Manchester. Our course advisor team are here to support prospective students and make the decision-making and application process as smooth as possible. And at the end of today's session, I will share my contact details with you if you'd like to get in contact with us. And I'm going to hand over to Sarah and Rebecca to introduce themselves as well.
Hi, shall I go first? I'm Becky Bennett. I'm a Professor of Bioethics here at the University of Manchester. I'm also the Programme Director for this programme that you're interested in. I've been working and teaching at the University of Manchester for 31 years now, which is a very long time. I teach bioethics, so I'm very much on the ethical side. Sarah's on the law side. So between us, we should be able to answer all of your questions. And it's absolutely brilliant to see so many of you on the call today, and I look forward to talking to you and answering all your questions, hopefully.
Hi everyone, I'm Sarah Devaney and I'm a Professor of Healthcare Law and Regulation. Really delighted to be on the call with you today. I'm going to be the Programme Director for the forthcoming semester from this February to the beginning of August, to cover for Becky while she goes on some very well-deserved research leave. So I'll be delighted to answer any queries during that period of time that you might have. My background is in legal practice, and while I was in legal practice, I joined this course. So I studied the MA, as it was then, in healthcare ethics and law while I was in practice as a lawyer, and that inspired me to come into academia full-time. So I can heartily recommend the programme. It might change your life. It certainly did for me. So looking forward to having a discussion with you today.
Okay, thank you very much, both of you. And just again to remind anyone who's just joined a little bit late, throughout the session today, you can either use the chat or the Q&A functions to submit any questions that you have for our panel. And we will come to those in a specific section in just a moment. We're going to start today, though, with questions that have been submitted in advance about the course. So I'll just get started. First question we've had is, how does online learning work?
I think I'll take that one if that's all right. I mean, I set up this programme in 2002 that Sarah then came onto very early on. And I think the whole ethos of this course is to make the course really flexible. We know that most of our students have got jobs and busy lives, so the way that this course works is that it's very flexible. Most of the content is done whenever you are able to do it. So we use online discussions, we use course materials that are interactive with lots of activities, and there are lots of things to do, but you can do them at your own pace. So if you've got time off on a Thursday evening, you can do it on a Thursday evening. Now, it's important to me that even though you're distance learning students, that you don't feel that you're isolated from everybody else. So we put a lot of effort into making sure that the group gets to know each other and that you get to know us as tutors as well. So you've got that flexibility, but you've also got that ability to talk to each other and to talk to us. So I have online office hours every week, so all of the courses do that, but I also have some online group chats that are optional for students to drop into, and we have lots and lots of activities and discussions that allow you to talk to each other. There is one opportunity each year for you to come onto campus in the study day in May, and that's optional as well, but it gives you that opportunity, if you're able to come onto campus and meet each other in person. So generally, it's a very flexible approach, but hopefully one where you really get to know each other and to get to know us as well. But it means that we don't have lots of timetabled long online lectures and those sorts of things, because it just doesn't work with people's lifestyles, but also with all the different time zones that we have to deal with. So hopefully you'll find it a really flexible approach, but a really supportive one as well.
Brilliant, thank you. And just on that subject, is there any particular point where you have to attend online lectures or tutorials at a specific time?
No, there's no requirement to attend anything apart from if you want to come to the study day at a particular time. We do have online office hours every week that you can book into and come along and talk to us, and there will be optional seminars and other group chats that you can come along to if you're able to and you want to. But if you can't meet for those drop-in sessions, those office hours, or for anything else, you can just get in touch with us and we can find another time for us to have those conversations. So there's nothing where you have to be in a specific place at a specific time.
That's brilliant, thank you. And we are just going to move on to a couple of questions we've had asked about assessments. Can you go into a little bit more detail about how the course is assessed?
Yes, sure. The course is mainly assessed by coursework, so that might be essays, it might be a problem question. It's mainly in that format, so you don't have exams, which I think is a major bonus, because I always hated exams. And the problem with exams is it doesn't necessarily test the sorts of things that we're trying to get you to learn, the skills and the ability to really put that analysis into the work that you're doing. So it's mostly coursework. I know there's a question that's been submitted about how often that is. I've designed the course so you do one course at a time. So you're doing one course unit, you do the assessment for it, and then you move on to the next one. For me, that just seemed a lot more manageable, that you've just got to focus on one thing. And a lot of the course units have one piece of assessed work. They'll probably have some formative work where you can get some feedback without it being kind of formally assessed. The first two course units are longer core course units, and they have two pieces of assessed coursework. One, a much smaller one that's only worth 30% of the mark, and then a longer one later. So my course unit on philosophical bioethics, for everybody apart from those doing the certificate in law, is the one that you do first, and you start it in September. There'll be a very short assessment in November of 1,500 words that's only worth 30% of the mark, and then a longer one at the end of January. So that's all you have to do from September until the end of January, is those two bits of coursework, obviously working through all the materials, doing the discussions and activities, and hopefully talking to me quite a lot about the work. But those are the two pieces of work that you do for that course work. And that's very typical, to give you plenty of time to really focus on that and to give us time to support you to do that coursework. As I say, having those shorter ones in those first two course units means that you get a chance to have a go at writing this coursework, to doing an essay, to using all the, doing all the referencing and the things that really worry people a lot of the time, and get lots of support from me and lots of feedback when you do finally submit that piece of work, so that when you come to the bigger piece of coursework, you're much more confident about what you're doing. But as I say, so they're well spread out. They're mainly coursework, so no exams, and you will get lots and lots of support from us to help you to really tackle those assignments with confidence.
And I would just add that support's really crucial, because we understand that just about everybody who studies this programme will not have had experience either of bioethics or of healthcare law, and people may have had no experience of either of those things at all, so it could be quite new. And a lot of the initial parts of those two core modules is dedicated to bringing you up to speed with how those disciplines work, the skills that you need, and how to apply those. So in the law one, that is the second major one, for example, we get you used to reading case law and analysing it and so on, to give you some feedback on that from the first small assignment. So by the end of those two modules, students are up to master's level study in those two disciplines, which potentially have been very new to you fairly recently.
I think those are great points, Sarah. I think it's also important to add that lots of you that will do this course may have not studied for a while, may have not written an essay for a while, may have not used online resources or access reading through electronic journals and electronic library kind of issues. And that's something that I spend a lot of time with the students in that first course unit, really getting them used to the online environment, how to do all those things, how to feel really confident about writing an essay. As I say, lots of people haven't written an essay for a very long time, and they may have never really written an essay on the law or ethics before. So, you know, we spend a lot of time in that first course unit and into the second course unit, really getting you so that you're really confident with all of those things. We spend a lot of time with you. So don't worry if you're feeling a little bit intimidated, I guess, by thinking about doing this online. We're really there to support you. This course has been running since Sarah did it in 2002, and you know, we've got lots of experience of knowing the sorts of support that really helps our students, and we're always here to listen if you've got other things that we don't cover. So that's a really, really important part of what we do on the course.
That's brilliant, thank you. And I guess we've just had one other question submitted in advance around the topic of coursework. Just asking a little bit more kind of specifically, how far in advance do you receive the deadlines for your coursework?
The minimum that you will get them is 6 weeks. I think that's the kind of policy requirement. We tried to get them to you as early as possible. I don't release my questions immediately that the course starts in September, because I find the students just focus on the assessment and don't really allow themselves to work through the materials. But you'll get them at least 6 weeks in advance of the deadline to submit, probably usually before that as well. So you will have plenty of time, and as I say, we're there every step of the way. I'm dealing with lots of my students at the moment. They've got a deadline of the 23rd of January at the moment, so I'm really working with them, doing lots of Zooms with them, answering lots of questions about the essay and what they need to include. So hopefully, you know, you really will feel that you've got plenty of time, and that's the reason for only doing one course unit at a time. You'll only ever have one piece of course work to focus on at any one time before you move on to the next one. So hopefully that will give you, you know, enough time to be able to deal with this without it being a rush, and allowing you to work when you've got the time to do so. I know one of the questions that people ask, and I think it's one of the ones that have been submitted, is how much time do I need to spend a week on the course and the course materials and all the activities? And I think, you know, I guess the official answer is about 15 hours a week, but it won't always be that you'll spend 15 hours a week on this course. You've all got lives, you've all got work, you've all got things that are going on. So you might spend 5 to 10 hours a week some weeks, and you might spend a little bit more another time, particularly when you're coming up to these coursework submissions. So it allows you to really put the work in when you're able to do that. and giving you the coursework information and lots of support early means that if you've got time early on to really work on those course submissions, then you're able to do that because it's a very flexible approach. So hopefully that answers that question. I don't know, Sarah, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I think that covers it. Yeah.
That's brilliant. And I think just on the subject, because that was the next question I was going to ask, was the average times of studying. I guess the other thing to bear in mind as well is that, you know, we say 15 to 20 hours as an average for studying. Of course, that so much depends on your own personal learning style as well. And you may just need to think about that as well when you're thinking about scheduling your time. Does it take you a bit longer to read through materials? If you're doing a lot of reading, are you going to need to dedicate a little bit of extra time that week? And maybe you write much faster when it comes to submitting your coursework. And just to think about it in that sense as well, when it comes to scheduling your time, it's a question that we get asked a lot as people are deciding about whether or not to study the course.
No, it's a tricky one. I think you're right, Hazel. It all depends, you know, how fast you are at reading, how, you know, how quickly you get on with writing, how well organised you are. And I think that's one of the skills that, you know, you'll start to develop even more through doing this course, is how to really focus when you have got a little bit of time to work on this, to make sure you're able to really focus on it. But we do find that our students, I mean, most of our students are working, most of them are kind of mid-career, so they've got fairly demanding jobs, and we do find that our students do cope with the workload. So, you know, it's tried and tested. This course has been running for 22 years, 23 years now, and we really do everything we can to ensure that students aren't doing things that are time consuming they don't need to. So we provide direct links to reading rather than spending time having to go trying to find things in the library electronically. But we find that students with busy jobs can cope with this, hopefully with our support. So, you know, we're flexible, but hopefully it means that we've designed something that will work around what you need to do.
Yeah, and just where you've just mentioned textbooks, I know we've had a question submitted as well about whether there are any core textbooks that students need to purchase. So that probably fits in quite nicely to add that question in here. And I know, Sarah, you indicated you wanted to answer this one.
Yeah, it's a good question. As a student on this programme, you're provided with really comprehensive study materials for each module. And they're bang up to date, but they do also include some additional essential reading to supplement the knowledge that you'll gain through those course materials. And sometimes that is a reference to a particular textbook. So, for example, in the legal courses, there are a couple of textbooks that we recommend that students use, Brazier Cave and Haywood, or Mason and McCall Smith. And that's just a personal choice. But the great thing is that as a student registered on the programme, you'll be able to access those through the library online without having to make an additional purchase. And that applies to, as Becky says, we try to make sure that the materials that we direct you to, you're directly linked through to those, and you can access them through your registration with the university. So I hope that helps on that question.
So you should be able to do the whole program without buying a book. All of the stuff that you need will be through the library electronically. Or you might want to buy a book if you know, lots of people find that really useful. Some people buy the books that are provided electronically if they prefer to learn that way, and there's often cheap ways of doing that, but you can do the whole course without ever buying a book. We can also put you in touch with any local libraries and give you a letter of introduction. Sometimes that allows you to go in and study in other libraries. So there's lots of things we can do, but you shouldn't have to buy any textbooks if you don't choose to.
That's brilliant, thank you. And so the next question we have is someone's asked if they're asked for how they participate during the teaching process of the course. So I think that's referring to things like what you've said about the discussion boards, you know, and things like that, and ways to get involved. Are they marked in any way on that?
So what we do is we have lots of discussion boards. I use Padlet at the moment, and we're going to share a Padlet link for you to ask questions on at the end of this session. So it's just a discussion board that's quite easy to use. We use that to introduce yourselves to each other, but also I'll set questions on the topic that we're looking at that week, where I'll ask you, in my case, an ethical question about a particular case or a particular issue, and then you can submit your own answer on the discussion boards to that question. It then means I can give you immediate feedback by responding to what you say, and it really helps you to build your confidence in doing what I'm trying to get you to do, which is to really engage with ethical questions and learn to get confidence in answering those ethical questions. So I'm able to really respond to that. You can read other people's responses, which is really great. I also have lots of other activities that we do. I do something where I get you to mark an essay so you can see the sorts of things that work and maybe don't work so well. I get you to assess the introductions for essays and all sorts of different things that you know we can do online in a very flexible way. We also have regular seminars at the university that you can participate in by going on Zoom, or if you're local, you're very welcome to come in and actually attend those. And there may be other events at the university that you can come in or join online as well. So there's lots and lots of things you can do. But as I say, we really try and make sure that they're as flexible as possible. I run, as I say, these student drop-ins that you can come and talk to me one-to-one, and I also run group sessions, group chat sessions. They're completely optional because some people won't be able to make it. But I move them around, so hopefully we can try and find a time that will work for everybody. And if anything comes up in any of the kind of scheduled things that I think is useful for the group, I will then feed that back to the whole group. So if you're unable to make any of those things, then that's fine. I know there was a question about whether you're marked for that participation on some of the discussion boards. You're not marked on that at all. So if you decide that they're not for you, then nobody's going to come and shout at you for not contributing to those discussions or attending the group sessions or meeting me in the one-to-one sessions. However, I do think you get more out of the course if you do try and contribute to those. And hopefully you'll find it a really supportive environment. I'm there to make sure that you do well. That's what my job is. So I make sure that when I give you that feedback on those discussion boards, it's something that's really supportive, it's really positive, and it will really help you to get that confidence you need for that first assignment and then moving on to the second assignment. So it's great if you do participate, but you're not marked on it. It's hopefully a very supportive, positive experience that you can really enjoy, I hope, because we discuss lots of really fascinating things, and you learn from the feedback that I give you, but you also learn from reading each other's posts.
That's great, thank you. And Sarah, was there anything else you wanted to add at all?
No, I would just really endorse the point that, you know, if you are available to take part in any of those types of engagement, either in person or through the chats, it's a great, because it's not assessed, it's a great way of testing out how the way that you're starting to apply your new ethical analysis or your new legal analysis, how that is developing for you, and to get some feedback on that through the responses from your tutors. And it's a fun way to engage with other people who are taking part in the course as well. And we do find that our cohorts do tend to enjoy that sort of engagement as well, where they're able to take part in it.
That's brilliant, thank you both. So the next question we have is moving on to what's the main difference between the LLM and the MA qualifications?
Should I take that one? The main is the emphasis, really. So if you're doing the LLM, you will be expected to focus on law options, which means that you're slightly restricted on the course units that you take. If you do the masters, you can still do all the law options if you want to, but you've got a freer choice about options that you do. When it comes to the dissertation as well, if you're doing the LLM, we would expect the focus to be predominantly on the law as well. So it's just a different emphasis going through some of the same course units, but then when it comes to the options, if you're doing the LLM, we will be steered more towards the legal options.
Yeah, and there's a question in the Q&A which follows on from that. What are the key differences in the modules between LLM full-time, and I think you might mean the campus-based there, and the part-time online format. Specifically use ethics, genetics and genomics, an optional module for the LLM. It can be, certainly you're not ruled out from doing any ethics modules, but you need to have a predominantly law focus in your optional modules. But if you've got a specific interest in that in particular, there is room for you to take that as one of the options.
Yeah, just to jump in on that. So we will cover the optional and the mandatory units as well when we do the course overview. So that will give specifically some more details about what's mandatory and what's optional for MA. So we will cover that in a little bit more detail, more visually, so that you'll be able to see that as well. Okay, and then the next question we have, again, this is probably one of our most frequently asked questions, is do I have to have studied law to be able to study the LLM?
You don't have to have studied law to do the LLM, and that's one of the great benefits of this as an LLM program, and quite distinct, I think. We spend a lot of time in the initial core law module bringing everybody up to speed on their understanding of the legal system, its application through case law and statutes, acts of parliament, so that there's a really great in-depth understanding of that system and how it applies in the healthcare setting. So we don't assume any legal knowledge at all. It does mean that in the early stages of the core law module, if anybody does have some legal knowledge, that will be a refresher for them, but there's no assumption that there will be that existing knowledge, and we make sure that we provide all of the information and support that people will need to get to that stage where, as I say, they're studying at this postgraduate level in healthcare law.
And there's no expectation that you've ever studied ethics before either. So you may have studied ethics before, but it's the same situation there. We assume you haven't, and we will give you that support to get up to speed very quickly and able to really start engaging in these ethical and legal questions with confidence very quickly.
That's brilliant. And I guess another question we've had submitted in advance was around the sort of law questions for people who are based abroad. So for someone who's based abroad, they've asked, will the dissertation have to be based on UK or local laws? And are there any overseas-based lecturers or lecturers familiar with overseas laws if wanted to clarify anything during the dissertation process?
So the programme is based on the law of England and Wales, or occasionally, depending on the jurisdiction of the specific topic, on that of the UK. We do look at some of the EU and human rights law provisions and their application to the law of England and Wales. And we have a module that looks at global health law in a broader perspective. So looking at different approaches to health law internationally, for example, in the public law context in relation to, so COVID was an example of how international laws apply in the healthcare setting, of course. We don't cover every other jurisdiction internationally, and the lecturers are experts in the law of England and Wales predominantly. But in relation to the dissertation, which I think was a specific query there, what students from other jurisdictions often tend to do is to do a kind of comparative approach, because you know, you might be thinking, well, it'd be really useful for me to look at the law on assisted reproduction, because it's an area of practice that you're involved in some way, and we wouldn't be able to support a purely external legal system approach, but we can support a comparative approach there. So looking at how the approach is in the law of, under the law of England and Wales, for example, and in your home jurisdiction. But we can't facilitate purely pure dissertations that are focused on one other international jurisdiction in their entirety. Otherwise, we'd have to have an enormous staffing body.
No, that's great. Thank you very much. And so some of the things for us are, what professions are current students on the course working in at the moment?
Well, there's lots of different professions. I guess predominantly it's healthcare professionals and lawyers, but I mean, healthcare professionals covers medics, nurses, midwives, pharmacists, dentists. We've had occupational health people. We've had people who are chaplains in hospitals. We've had often get people who are working for medical or legal organisations that are really interested in getting that background as well. So it's quite a wide spectrum of people. Have I missed out anybody, Sarah, that you can think of?
Well, also regulators themselves, and charitable organisations, people working in those sectors, so third sectors and so on. So it's a really great range of backgrounds that people bring, and that can really add to the interesting discussions that come up on discussion boards, because obviously people bring their own professional experience to their understanding of ethical quandaries and legal provisions, and having those insights is always really fascinating for us as well as the students.
That's great, thank you. And just thinking about what students have gone on to do after graduating from the course as well, do we have any information about that available?
I guess it's more anecdotal than anything else, but I mean, I think lots of people do this because they don't necessarily want to change their career, but they want to deal with ethical and legal issues in their work as a healthcare professional or a lawyer with more confidence. So that's often what happens there, at least in the initial period of this, that people don't dramatically change their jobs necessarily, but they are much more confident and maybe take a slight direction in their existing job. We often find that lots of people end up sitting on ethics committees or even running the training in the trust that they work in or in the area that they work in for ethics and law. So it might be that they don't necessarily change their profession, but there are quite a few people, as Sarah's here too, you know, is a really good example. Sarah was on the very first cohort of this distance learning programme that I set up. And she's now a professor of medical law. So, you know, you can see how her journey changed. And lots of people will do this master's or an LLM and then may go on to do a PhD and end up being an academic. So there's all sorts of different things that happen here. People enhancing what they already do and maybe taking them a slightly different direction within their existing career path to actually branching out and doing something that's quite different. Sarah's probably the best person to talk about this, really, if you've got anything you wanted to add.
Yeah, so as I mentioned at the beginning, it did inspire me to change from legal practice to academia. And you know, I've never regretted that decision. And we do have lots of PhD students, obviously, that come to our programme to further their career in that way. We've also had quite a few people who perhaps have a medical background and then go into medico-legal advice, either with defence organisations or with regulators, and so on. So that's been an interesting, as Becky's saying, an interesting addition, you know, a string to the bow, a way of specialising. Or we have people who are in healthcare practice and stay within that, but internally they become the specialist in some kind of, you know, perhaps safety regulation or something like that. So yeah,
we run a PhD by distance learning now, so
mm.
we will be trying to tempt you in that direction as well.
Okay, do you know what? A few people do actually ask that, and it's not been one of our submitted questions today, but a few people have said, are they able to go on to PhD study afterwards? So that's really great to hear as well. So I've just got a couple more questions here to cover. I think probably more aimed at me, and then I'll do a quick overview of the course as well. So we've got, is this course eligible for student finance? So that's for people based in the UK. And the answer is, unfortunately, not as straightforward as we'd like it to be. It does vary depending on the qualification type. So the LLM and MA, it's most likely going to be. It's also going to depend on your personal circumstances. So the best thing I can advise is, if you're interested in applying for the course through student finance, is to check the details through the student finance website for your local area. So England, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland. Make sure and check the details on there. And if you do have any specific questions relating to that, to come back to us and to ask it, and we'll look at it a little bit more detail based on your specific circumstances. But it's very, very difficult for us to advise on that because we don't do those student finance assessments, but you should be able to apply for it for the MA and the LLM. But then I think in one of the regions, you can also apply for it for postgraduate diploma and postgraduate certificate as well, but you've got to check that depending on your region and depending on the criteria. And it is updated regularly, so I would just recommend that you check there first. And if you've got more specific questions, to come back to us about that. And then the other question that we have is relating to sponsorship and people who are sponsored by their employers. And what would they need to do? Is there anything different they need to do in the application process? So in terms of if your employers agree to fund or partially fund your fees, in terms of notifying the University of Manchester, you don't actually have to do anything at the time of applying. You will have, you can indicate on the application form that that's what you intend to do, but you don't have to formally have it agreed before you apply to the course. But what you do need to do is when you register around August or September time, you will need to upload a sponsor letter, and your sponsor then gets directly invoiced by the University of Manchester. So if you are applying for funding from your employer, we recommend you do that in plenty of time for the course starting in September. And if you do need specific course information, such as learning outcomes or anything very specific to show how you're meeting certain requirements of your role, we encourage you to get into contact with us, and we can look at that and give you a bit more bespoke support. And for that, you can email studyonline@manchester.ac.uk in the first instance. And if I can't help you or one of our course advisors can't help you, then we'll forward it on to get you some more specific and bespoke support to get you that information that you need. And I've just put the email address as well into the chat so that you've got it there to refer to. So that basically covers the questions that we've had submitted today. I'm just going to give you all a very brief course overview, giving you a bit more information about the programme. And then from there, if there is anything else that crops up, then you can let us know. Okay, so in terms of the course, we've covered this in quite a lot of detail already, but there are 5 different qualification options. So starting in September, you've got the LLM and the MA routes. You've also got postgraduate diploma and postgraduate certificate focusing in healthcare ethics. And if you were starting the course in January, there's also a postgraduate certificate in healthcare law. And the duration for that will vary between 15 and 24 months, depending on which qualification option that you choose. In terms of the assessment, we've already covered this in quite a lot of detail throughout today's session, but it is coursework based, and for the LLM and the MA qualifications, there is also the dissertation as well. In terms of a time commitment for the course, we recommend on average 15 to 20 hours of study per week, but that is flexible, and that is also going to vary depending on your own learning style as well. You will have the chance to learn in your own time through our virtual learning environment. And you can consolidate that learning that you're doing through the reading, through the video lectures, through things like the group discussions and discussion boards throughout each of those units. And as an online student as well, you do have full access to the University of Manchester's resources. So that's things like the library, you can get a student card, you have access to things like the career support, exactly the same as an on-campus student. And you can access as much or as little as you would like of that. And we are very much here to support. And as a student of one of our online courses as well, you do have a dedicated study advisor who will be your first point of contact for any non-academic inquiries as well. So looking at the course units in a little bit more detail, you can see a list here of the full list of units that we have on offer. And you can see what's mandatory and what is optional for each of those units. So I know there was somebody who was interested in the LLM earlier, talking about studying the ethics, genetics and genomics unit. So it's not usually an option for the LLM, but what you can do is study everything else law focused on the MA, but then you could study the ethics, genetics and genomics as an optional unit, for example. It's up on screen for you to read, and if you do want a copy of just this summary as well, that is available on our course webpage, and I'll put a link in the chat for you at the end of today's session as well. And one of the other things that people do quite often ask us relates to fees and discounts. So for September 2025, the fees for the MA and the LLM are 14,500. The postgraduate diploma is 9,667, and postgraduate certificate is 4,833. There is the option to spread the cost of your fees with 3 instalments per academic year. If you've applied for student finance, then those dates are aligned as well with the payment dates that you would get from student finance. And if you do have specific questions, as I've already mentioned, you can contact Study Online at manchester.ac.uk for more support, especially if you're applying for funding from your employer and you have specific questions. It's also worth highlighting that we do have a few discounts that are available. So there is a 10% discount when you apply by the 30th of June 2025. There's a 10% discount for NHS staff. And if you are eligible for that one, you will be in contact with our admissions team, and they will ask for more information about how to submit this and the deadline to send that information in by. And then the other thing as well is that if you are alumni of the University of Manchester, then there is also the 10% discount there. And I do just have to make you aware that it is a 1 discount policy. Unfortunately, the discounts aren't stackable, but there are a few different ways that you could save 10% on your tuition fee. And as well, just to highlight, especially with the deadline for the NHS discount, it can't be applied retrospectively. So you do need to ensure that you meet any deadline set by our admissions team to ensure that you receive that discount. And then very, very quickly, I'll just cover the entry requirements. So for this course, you would need an upper second class honours degree in a relevant subject for the MA or LLM. And by relevant subject, we mean something like medicine, law, philosophy, nursing, religious studies. If you do have specific questions about that, I'm more than happy to discuss individual cases with people as well. And then if you were studying the postgraduate diploma or the postgraduate certificate, that's a lower second class honours degree in a relevant subject. And in some exceptional circumstances, we can take professional experience into consideration in lieu of an undergraduate degree. And what we would say to that as well is that if you have passed the postgraduate certificate or the postgraduate diploma and meet the required academic requirements for the MA or the LLM, you can transfer onto those upon successful completion of those courses. For the English language, if English is your second language, then we do usually request that you have an English language qualification. Most common one that people are aware of is the IELTS, and we request an overall score of 7, including 7 in writing, and no component below 6.5. Or the equivalent. So it doesn't need to be an IELTS, it could be something like a TEFL, it could be something like a PTE, and you don't need that qualification before applying to the course. Our admissions team can offer you support for the programme to get the qualifications you need for the programme if you need it. So please don't let that put you off applying if that is what you want to do. And I will share the link as well in the chat for how to apply to the course. And that really sums up today's session. So I just want to say thank you very much to everyone who's joined us today. And I'm going to just share a series of links into the chat as well. And that's going to include a link to some more information about fees and funding. There's some more information. There's also the Padlet that Becky had mentioned earlier. And we will make sure that you get all of that information. You've already got my email address in the chat as well. And we really do want to hear from you. If there's anything further that we can help with, then we do actively encourage you to get in contact with us.
Yeah, please do get in touch. The Padlet link that's being sent round is a place for you to ask questions that I can then answer. It's also got my email address on it, so do get in touch with me directly if there are things that you want to ask me about the course or about getting on the course. So do get in touch. It'd be lovely to hear from you, either on the Padlet or by email. And yeah, we look forward to talking to you and hopefully seeing you in the future.
Yeah, and so that's brilliant. Thank you very much, everyone, as well, for joining us today. Thank you to Becky, thank you to Sarah as well. It's been really great to hear from you. And if anybody does have any further questions or would like to book a consultation to discuss the course in more detail, then I have just launched a poll, so you can indicate that you'd like me to get in touch with you, and I'll follow up with you after today's session as well.